Thank you, Danielle. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our third in a series. And we're going to do some question and answers with the Entrepreneur Advisory Team. And we're powering the pandemic pivot because we like tongue twisters too. Today we have Jason Myers from Meyer Business Law, and he is dedicated to the legal needs of entrepreneurs and the businesses they run. Jason will provide a brief update on the government grant and loan programs, but mostly focus on what businesses can do now to be primed to rebound, especially when it comes to their sales and business dealings. Aisha Hamilton is the owner at Hamilton Law, and her practice focuses on employment law. She's going to talk about the new laws, regulations affecting employees and employers, and what they can do, what they should plan for when they return to work. I'm Elisa McCabe. I'm the owner at First Steps Financial, and we are a dedicated team of accountants and advanced certified QuickBooks Pro advisors, and we focus on business owners and helping them achieve success in their businesses. I'm going to be talking today about some new things that have come out about PPP and how to track it inside of your accounting system, and some IRS notices that were made available just recently. Danielle Gill is also on with us. She is First Steps Financial's digital marketing manager, and she helps coordinate all of our social media. I also want to make sure everybody knows that all this information that we're presenting today is for general information, and it is for educational purposes only. Please put all of your questions inside of the chat box, and we will answer them as we can. And we are going to start with Jason, and he is going to provide some information.
Thank you, Lisa. How are you? Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, live or otherwise on tape. Great to be with you again, and great to do our third in a series. We've decided every time we get together, we have plenty to talk about, and that it might be useful to do that on a little more formal basis and share it with those of you, people we care about. And pass along what wisdom we can. In my world, in the world of the small business, of the entrepreneur operated business, there were two news articles over the last 2 weeks, actually over the last 3 days, that really caught my eye that I wanted to share with everyone. One I saw on from our friends at Planet Princeton, but actually from a investigative reporting project that they're a part of, that determined that New Jersey, although we are one of the two states with New York most hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic, New Jersey, like New York, got a relatively small share of PPP funds by the percentage of businesses. The actual total dollar amount was a decent amount, was sort of like in the top, I think 12 or 15 of states. But if you look at it on a percentage basis, that is how many businesses are in that state that applied for relief from the federal government. New Jersey was near the bottom of the barrel in terms of the relief we received from the federal government, even though we are near the top of the second hardest hit in terms of the effect of the pandemic on our state and the businesses in our state. While other states are reopening, we can't, and the pandemic is still too strong in our state to allow that to happen. The bottom line is, are you surprised? Most of the people I know that applied didn't get any money. A lot of us haven't even heard back from the government, or I actually got an email saying, yeah, we got that application. We'll let you know. We're ready to read it. But states that are, let's say, redder, seem to have fared better in the sweepstakes for who got the money. I commend this article to your attention, as I do an excellent article from Annie Lowry at theatlantic.com with the depressing title, The Small Business Die-Off is Here. Annie reports, despite this government relief effort, the programs are too complicated, too small, and too slow for small businesses, and millions of small businesses are struggling and dying all over the country. Her reporting is that half of small businesses had less than 2 weeks of cash on hand going into the pandemic. By and large, we didn't know it was coming. So it wasn't something that we had particularly saved up, that most businesses I know had saved up for. In fact, because of the nature of the economy, most businesses I know were growing as fast as they could. That's not a time when you're hoarding cash. They also looked at statistics from credit card processors to determine, well, what does this drop off look like? And credit card processors are reporting 30% of small businesses have just flat out shut down. They're not doing any sales. In other industries, ad agencies down 60% in their credit card charges. Daycare centers down 75%. Travel agencies, not surprisingly, down 98%. Her forecast is that the result of this, of government relief programs they're really not built for the entrepreneur-operated business. By the way, she also reported that in the first tranche of PPP funds, the first $350 million, half of that was in loans greater than $1 million. To get a loan of greater than $1 million under the PPP, you needed to have a 2.5-month payroll in that range. Those are not, even if we're doing great, even if you're an entrepreneur-operated business doing terrific, unless you're Amazon, which is an entrepreneur-operated business, or Facebook, you are not in that kind of payroll range. You're not getting this money. So the forecast. So we know these programs weren't really built for our kind of businesses. If you're in New Jersey or New York or Pennsylvania, the federal government is not cutting you a particularly large slice of this pie. In fact, you're getting less of the pie than your brothers and sisters in other states. And the programs themselves are really not built for our kind of needs. Are you surprised? I'm not. This is what I think we're all experiencing. But we're entrepreneurs. You're entrepreneurs. What does that mean? That means you are by nature creative. You see challenges and look for opportunities. And you are by nature stubborn. And you're not going to give up. And I have to say, part of what this news tells me is really the only way to move forward is to pivot. And it's why we have adopted the title for our series of Powering the Pandemic Pivot, because to me, that's the real PPP. It isn't this protection plan from the government that's going to do much more than give anyone a little bit of short-term relief. It's going to be powering a pivot and doing that ourselves. That's going to be our form of relief. In other words, we're going to have to do it ourselves. In my world, in my law firm's focus, what does that mean for the kinds of things that are the questions I get from my clients, which are really about structuring their business and structuring their business deals, putting together contracts, putting together processes to close the deals they need to close. To me, the number one lesson in this space, looking forward and building to pivot, is this is the time to get your house in order. For a lot of businesses, you may have been operating, and a lot of entrepreneurially operated businesses in particular, you're running lean. When times are busy and you got a lot of clients, you let it ride, and you take all the time you can to deal with your clients and to keep the business flow going. And that means you probably weren't spending a lot of time on the formalities and the structural things that pretty much knew you needed to do. Well, this is the time. Now you got time. So take advantage of that time now so you're ready to rebound when the opportunity arises or when you find the opportunity to rebound. You've got to build that infrastructure for yourself to be ready to have a business that goes. Now, Let me offer some examples. I know, in my regular practice, and I think this goes for Elisa and for Ayesha as well, right? Know tons of consultants who oftentimes don't get paid, or they don't get paid everything they wanted to get paid. Why? Well, they got scope creep, right? They put a ton of time into something and aren't really being paid for all that time because they couldn't control the scope of their deal. Or maybe we're talking about an advertising agency or a marketing firm or someone who does social media, and they're not really getting paid for all the value they're delivering because their clients are taking a little bit and reusing it because they're not properly controlling their own intellectual property in the deals that they're making. Or the one I really want to spend most of my time on as an example today, which is home contractors. Look, I'm just a lawyer. Here's my forecast for people who are in the home contracting business. It's horrible now because the state says you can't even go into people's houses unless you're talking about an emergency kind of repair, certain kinds of home repairs. But by and large, you're really not even supposed to be in someone's house. But what are we doing living and working in our homes? I know what I'm doing. I'm walking around the house and going, oh, the roof, I got to get the roof fixed. Oh, that bathroom leak is driving me crazy. As soon as I can let somebody in here, I got to get this fixed. Okay. Everybody in America is building a list of what we need contractors to do as soon as we can let contractors in our house. You're going to go from 0 to more work than you can possibly handle. But here's the thing. The state of New Jersey has a specific law that says contractors have to give a written notice to their home contractors, have to give a specific written notice to their customers, written by the state, and the contract that you have with your customers needs to have specific provisions in writing. I know 0 home contractors who are doing this. I'm sure they're out there, but none of the ones I deal with have a written first of all, a lot of them don't even operate on written contracts. Like, yeah, sure, I'll stop by and take care of it, right? But I'm talking about contractors who are perfectly willing to do, tens of thousands of dollars of work in my home, who are doing it on basically an invoice that says proposal on it, doing it on a one-page sheet of paper that is something, that's like that was the proposal template from Microsoft Word. And they started using it 10 years ago, and that's still what they're using it. Because you didn't have time to do anything about it. Now you got time. Now you should take the time and create a contract that meets these requirements, but also will let you close deals at the pace at which you're going to have to close deals to avoid losing deals when the floodgates open. Now, why do you care? Why do you really care whether you're, okay, all right, the state's telling me I got to do it. I know that's the law. What does it really cost me if I don't do it? Here's what it costs you. Contractors, you could be done with the job. You could be tens of thousands of dollars in materials and time you haven't been paid for yet. And your customer can say, oh, guess what? Your contract doesn't meet the requirements of the state of New Jersey. I'm not paying you. And they don't have to. So this isn't merely a matter of compliance, although I happen to be a huge believer in compliance. This is a matter of whether you get paid. So you didn't have time, now you do. Contractors are only one example. There are many others. What do? First of all, take the time to get a solid customer written contract prepared that covers all these state regulatory bases, that covers the risks you face the most, that has language that won't scare your customers off, and that's ready to roll. And part of being ready to roll to me means you've also written that contract and built it into a process which is scalable and repeatable. Because if you're fumbling around to get a proposal off to a client, if you're fumbling around to get something in writing in front of the client, you're going to lose the business when the floodgates open. Because I just need somebody to come to the house right now and take care of that toilet. So you want to have your contracts in a way where they can be digitally delivered. They can be digitally signed, where it doesn't require very much to get a new copy of it with the details in it you want.
Can
Um,
Jason,
this
can
is a place where you go to your professional and you get that done.
that's,
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, so where can you get a contract that, someone in construction can use that has simple language that, their customers can understand and won't be scared away by?
Me, no.
Well, they can reach out
Yeah,
to
I
you,
mean, yes, you look, you're not going to get it. Where do most people get their contracts for that kind of work?
but
They
they
go to
take
Google
it online.
and they type in the kind of contract they want, and they find some PDF and they download it and they try and use it. Okay, that's not going to work, because that's not going to be built. A, that's not going to be built for your business.
Right.
B, most of the places where you can get that contract without spending anything are only giving you that contract because they've embedded malware in the file. So don't download that sucker. Okay, those PDF mills, yeah, there's a reason they're going to give you all those PDFs for free. It's because they've now taken control of your computer for the next point of service attack. You're not going to get it from LegalZoom, because LegalZoom's just creating a template that fits all. You don't want a template that fits all. You want a template that fits you. It's time to go to a lawyer. It's time to go to a professional who does contracts for a living and have a conversation with them to get what it is you need built, and to do it in a way that's scalable and repeatable. And I don't know anywhere to get it other than going to the people who do this for a living. You don't want me fixing my toilet. I don't want you writing a contract. Okay, same thing's going to happen. You're going to have all over the place.
and and so they can use the contract over and over. It's just
That's
something
the whole
that,
idea, is build it so you can use it over and over again. I mean, I have clients, and I don't think that this is a unique skill, but I'm going to use it as an example. I have clients who, when they sign a new piece of business, they send me an email. The email is, Jason, this is the name of the client, the address, the scope of work, the price. Okay, I take it, I drop it into a template, I deliver it for electronic signature. Okay. Now, this kind of segues me to another part of this, which is, it isn't just a matter of having a contract. If you're a home contractor, maybe it is, because you're going to sell what you always do, and the product you've always sold is going to be fine. But for a lot of other businesses, part of the pandemic pivot is figuring out how to update your offering, and the deal you're going to offer, so that it matches these times. You're selling something people still need, and you're selling it in a way they can buy. I'm going to do that with contractors, right? They can't pay me. They can't pay me everything now. They're going to have to pay me when they get the business. Okay, we'll figure it out. Find somebody who's going to figure that out with you. This is a great time to team up. If you've thought about teaming, here we are. If you've thought about teaming up in the past, if you've thought, hey, this is somebody who, who's close by what I do, but not exactly competitive. This is somebody who can add to my offering. This is somebody who can help me take care of something for my customers I haven't been able to take care of. This is the time to have those phone calls, because we're all sitting around looking for phone calls and happy to have phone calls. This is the time to get creative with each other. And the same thing with your professional advisors. If you're going to call your landlord and tell your landlord what it is you really need to do to be able to keep renting that property, then you can call your service providers and have the same conversation. Hey, this is what I can do now. This is what I need for the future. And that's part of being creative and entrepreneurial, to be ready to power your own pivot. Does that answer your question? So
I just was saying,
that's my basics. I'm gonna stop yakking and let you take over.
So what I was thinking is that it's a one-time investment that you make that gives a great return on it.
That is your return, yeah, on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Frankly, a good proportion of my clients who come to me for contracts, some of them are like, yeah, I got a deal. I'm going to buy this company. I'm going to sell this company, right? But mostly it's exactly this. This is a kind of deal I do all the time.
Okay.
And it's always a hassle. And either I don't do the deal right and I don't get paid well, or I just seem to really slow things down. The reason people don't like contracts, okay, because we think of them as being too long and too complex, and no one reads them, and they're just a hassle. And maybe they're there if I ever really feel like getting into a fight. To me, that's not their role. The role is that contract is the recipe card for what you're cooking with
Right.
the person you have a deal with. It should tell us what we do. It should give each of us our ingredients and our instructions,
If
and
I can
set the
add,
expectations.
so if I can just add,
Please.
the biggest argument that Jason won't say it, but I'll say it. The argument for getting a contract is you will pay Jason a fraction of the cost that you will pay somebody else to litigate the claim when you get screwed and you have to go after your customer to get paid. It is so much cheaper to just pay Jason right out of the gate to get this done quickly, easily, have a template in place, have something either he can fix for you every time or you fix. It is a fraction of the cost compared to what you would pay to pay somebody to go to court to get paid the tens of thousands that you're due on the work. And because you didn't have a good contract, it doesn't mean you can't recover, but you're going to have to sue them to get the money. It's much easier to just do it right out of the gate.
And what do most entrepreneurs do about that, Aisha? They just don't collect.
Yep.
They just say, it's not worth it. Never mind. Yeah,
And
my
that's
bad.
a whole other issue.
And that, how expensive is that? Right.
Exactly.
So but the key thing is you want to build it with whoever you build it with. You want to build it so that contract is ready to move at the speed of business.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Your legal function, and this is why we're all here, because we deeply believe this. Your legal function, whether it's about contracts or it's about your employees, your accounting and bookkeeping function, your business advice function, have to move at the speed of your business.
Yeah.
They cannot be things that slow down the closing.
And one of the things that I think, we as lawyers never do anything without a retainer agreement. I mean, that's the starting point is you sign my retainer agreement. That's all this is. You're all professionals in your own sphere of influence, in your own industry. And if somebody pushes back and says, what do you need this contract for? You just say, it's as much for your protection as it is for mine. It's really just, this is a professional way to do business. We do a contract, that's all. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't blow it up. You don't make a big deal about it. But I mean, when people come to me and they talk about, oh, well, I got to sign this 6-page thing. I'm like, yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. People don't question lawyers about signing retainer agreements. They shouldn't question plumbers, electricians, home contractors. That's part of doing business, is that you sign a contract.
And if they do question you, that's a tell, right?
That is a tell.
That's a tell. It's like, maybe I am better off not doing business with this person.
Very true.
Because if they're, I know a real estate agent, her rule is, the day before the contract gets signed, that's as happy as people will ever be, right? So if you can't get along at the beginning of the deal, you're not going to get along at the end of the deal. I think that's exactly right. And all the more the case if you are, again, let me take home contractors as an example. You're going to have more requests than you know what to do with. You want to be ready for that, and you don't need to be afraid going into that market. You are the one who will look like the professional when you get this stuff together, and that will be a selling point.
And I have to agree with you. Contractors are going to be extremely busy. We have a couple of contractor clients, and they are doing estimates for people because people are doing a lot of stay vacations. Mm-hmm. So they're staying home for vacation this year. So we have one contractor, they have 20 in-ground pools that they're doing estimates for.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, and they're doing in-ground pools, they're doing hot tubs, they're doing both. They're doing landscaping because they're going to be looking at their backyards all summer long. There is a lot of business out there. And when we open back up, there's going to be floodgates. It is going to be a surge.
But those floodgates, at least a chunk of the business in that floodgate, are not going to be people who are going to say, "Oh, and I'll pay you 70% up front." They're going to be, a lot of them are going to be in a position where they're going to say, "Look, I know you like to get paid 30% up front, 30% on the first order of materials. That's going to have to be 15 and 15, because
And
my client's going to sign a month after we go back into business, and they
Mhm.
don't pay me for 45 days. So it's going to be 120 days before my bank account's flush again."
And it's interesting because I think there are a group of people that are not as strongly affected. I know a lot of people are still working. I actually have a friend who works for a medical device company. She's a salesperson, and she's doing 0 sales. She is still getting paid 90% of her salary, which I'm impressed with their company for maintaining this workforce, knowing that they don't know how long, because medical devices, her particular ones, it's elective. It's not, necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a good mix out there. I'm fingers crossed. We're going to have a lot of good things come out after this.
Right. And if you're not a home contractor, to me, the lesson here is, you've got some time now. Start reading the news and start taking in information in a little bit different way. It is super easy to get depressed right now.
Oh yeah.
And that Atlantic article is both really important and frankly really depressing. And her prediction is this will be, we will lose a generation of entrepreneurs, and we will lose a generation of innovation.
Wow.
I don't happen to believe that, and I don't believe that because I don't think that's how innovators and entrepreneurs are built.
It's so funny.
So take what you're reading and put a different filter on it in your head. And the filter is not the sky has fallen. The filter is the sky is falling. What kind of umbrella do people need? Okay. And that's what entrepreneurs do. And just try to find that. And if you can't find it, to me, this is why I am just seeing a boom in one-on-one business development and networking calls, because we've got time and we're calling each other, and it's like, how you doing? What are you thinking about? What do you think's going on? And in that process, you'll have the idea.
I have to agree with you, Jason. I think we're going to see a lot of innovations where we haven't seen them. Entrepreneurs are naturally strong, creative. I think you used the word stubborn. They don't give up easily. And so I just wanted to tell you a few of the things that we've encountered from some of our business owners. So many of them are working on how to change and adapt to this new world. And some are doing exactly what Jason suggested. They're going back to their processes and they're finding what didn't they have time to do before, and how can they rebuild that so that when the floodgates do open, things work much smoother. I was speaking with one of our clients who's a travel agent, and he is sending out thank you notes and conversational notes to even those clients whose trips were canceled, so that he's still having that conversation with them, because people are not going to stop traveling forever, just for a little while. Until it's safe to do so, then, you will still be in their mind. A photographer is doing Zoom photos, which I thought was very cool. And they're doing professional shoots on Zoom. That's great.
Fascinating.
Yeah. People are coming up with all kinds of things, even in our own company, and we've never done this before. We're doing contingency plans. So, what can you do? What opportunities are out there for you, and what different scenarios might happen for you? So, we open at 50%. What does that look like for you? And so we have to talk about all those different contingency plans. And we wouldn't even have thought to do this before, because business was we could predict business. It was easily done, but not so much anymore because we're all unsure of what's going to happen. And it brings comfort to business owners to at least have some type of plan. And I think that's incredibly helpful and brings down that level of anxiety.
Yeah, and I think, another way to approach that to-do list is, think back a few months about what you were stressed about. Before, you were stressed about, whether your kids were going to get sick, and whether you could find toilet paper, and will you ever have a hamburger again? Before, you were stressed about those things. You were probably stressed about, hey, there's this business thing, this operational thing that I've been putting off for 3 years, and it's going to blow up. And I know it's going to blow up. It hasn't blown up yet, but I'm too busy to address it. I think that is a common experience. Think back, remember what that thing was. It's probably still sitting on some to-do list somewhere. Actually, that just made me think of an interesting exercise. Go back to like November or December and look at a to-do list you wrote then and see what's on it. And now you can start crossing those things off. And instead of being stressed about what we have now, you will have taken that other stress out of your life and you'll be ready to rock.
That's awesome. I'm going to, Jason, I want to share my screen.
Go for it.
All right. Get to there it is. So, sorry, this is really slow. So what I just wanted to catch everybody up on was about what's going on with the PPP loan, what's new from an accounting standpoint, and what's going on. So there was a couple of new questions that came out that the Treasury Department put out, and it focused more on if you are truly eligible for the PPP loans. Do you have, is it necessary? Which, and I'm sure that you can both attest to it. There'll be lots of arguments about what necessity means. And they've left it very vague. So question 31 dealt with big companies. And then they also added question 39, which talked about more in depth. And one of the major questions is, do you have access to other funds? And this isn't just for large corporations who can, find money in other ways. It's also for small businesses who might be sitting on money in their savings account. The SBA has also ruled that they are going to review all loans that are over $2 million. And then as a small caveat to that, they said, in addition to other loans as appropriate. So what does that mean? That means that anyone who has a PPP loan could be audited by the SBA to make sure that it was necessary and it was used properly. Just so you know, and you're aware of it. Again, they stress all the time, and I can't stress it enough, they say additional guidance is forthcoming. If you have gotten a PPP loan and you feel as though you shouldn't have, given, you've gone through, and Danielle's going to put in the chat box the links to the frequently asked questions from the SBA and the Treasury Department, and you can review those. But if you really feel like maybe you don't fit that criteria, that maybe you thought it was going to be necessary or there was uncertainty, but now that seems to have evaporated, you can definitely return the money. And how you do that is you go to your bank. And another thing to talk about the forgiveness is to ask your lender what documents they want, what they're requiring for forgiveness. There's no ruling from the SBA on it, Treasury Department, no one's touching that one yet, but your bank may have decided what they want. A little bit more news that came out, which is, I'm not too crazy about this one. So the loans and expenses, and how does this change your bottom line? So the IRS put out notice 2020-32, and it says that taxpayers may not deduct payroll, mortgage interest, rent, or utilities expenses that were paid with the PPP loans. Okay. Then it goes on to say that forgiven PPP loans won't be included in taxpayers' gross income. So that sounds great. Okay, good. We're not going to get taxed on money that was given to us, because in most cases you are taxed on it. If you have credit card debt and the credit card company forgives you that debt, you actually get taxed on that, on the money that is forgiven. But this case does not really have a net zero effect. If you think about it in a way that if you have $10,000 in sales and you normally have $5,000 in payroll or rent or all these other things, your net income would only be $5,000, and you would pay your taxes on that. In this case, you would have income of $10,000 and you would have no expenses of payroll or anything against it. So your net income would still be $10,000. So it would be considerably higher. So in a sense, you are being taxed on the money that you got. So now, God bless the AICPA, the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. So go virtually hug your CPAs if they belong to this. They are the new best friend of business owners, because they are making suggestions of that taxpayers. So they made a suggestion to the SBA and to the Treasury and to the IRS, and they said that they believe that it is the intent of the CARES Act to allow businesses to deduct all of their ordinary and necessary expenses, including all the expenses in determining the PPP covered costs. And they're seeking legislation clarification, and they're hopeful that it should come about in the next week or so. The full article that's in the Journal of Accountancy, we're providing in the chat box, but they are suggesting that business owners should be allowed to take these expenses, that the money should be considered a grant, because it actually does tax the money that they're given, and they're making a case for that. So we'll see what happens with it. I hope that there's some sort of change in this, because I think that it could be a detriment to some businesses that are going to end up actually paying more in taxes than they intended, and it might hurt them in the end, because I don't believe that most businesses are not going to end up where they thought they were going to at the end of the year. There's going to be a decrease in sales, and if you don't have those expenses to go against those sales, your tax burden is going to be higher.
Mm-hmm.
Alyssa, on that point, I just want to I really want to throw in a plug for your business, and okay,
go ahead.
One of the things I'm telling all of my clients now, especially those who have gotten the PPP loan, is call your CPA, call your CFO, call your accountant, call somebody who knows how to document and how to segregate these funds. So a lot of people are recommending that the PPP funds go into a separate payroll account, so that you can track every dollar to be able to justify that, yes, these dollars are eligible for forgiveness. So part of the whole discussion is the forgiveness decision comes from your bank, which is why there isn't really a whole lot of federal government guidance on it, though I wish there was. Like, as you said.
Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
And I think it's really important that you actually speak to a financial professional to make sure that you're getting very detailed guidance, right? This is probably not something a lawyer will do for you, but you need to speak with your CPA, or people that do what Alyssa does.
And we've actually had to address this with our clients, because they had concerns like, they know that we take care of their financial side. They actually came to us and said, well, what are you doing? And I actually didn't realize they would want to know the details. We actually put out a letter in detail of how we're tracking it. Some of the banks and some CPAs are suggesting that you open another bank account. And absolutely, if you do not have a qualified bookkeeper, if you do not have a good outsourced accounting department or a full accounting department that tells you what the plan is, I agree with that, because then you can document it very easily. We are tracking it as a loan inside of our clients' accounting software, and we use QuickBooks Online, and we are applying all the costs to it. And then we are documenting, because we are collecting third-party documentation, attaching it to the transactions, just making sure that it can easily be tracked, the PPP, both that and the EIDL. And Jason, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I had a question for you, which, if I'm right, is kind of an observation. You know, and I wholeheartly endorse Aisha's comment that, you know, this is something to take to your tax and accounting professional, and where I certainly rely on Elisa very heavily. But here's one of the things that I think is easily, you know, missed when you just see all this detail go by. So what Elisa had to rely on were these FAQ questions, where the SBA has sort of taken things that supposedly are things that they heard people ask them a lot and posted answers. Okay. That's not a law. It's not a regulation. It's not a rule. In my world, it has no binding force, and it's kind of, you know, not precise in its language either. No. And it's all we have to go on. Mm-hmm. So we have the government saying, well, you know, we can audit you, we could penalize you for misusing these funds, but, you know, the things that usually your tax professional would rely on, that big fat tax code with all these regulations that have been adopted through a formal regulatory process, we're not giving you that. We're going to sit down and sort of muse on some ideas and throw them out, and good luck.
Yeah.
Now, usually in the world of government enforcement, there's sort of a good faith provision where if you followed the advice, the best advice you could get from the government, it's pretty hard for the government to penalize you. But this is why you're encountering a world, if you're encountering this world, that seems so, you know, that sort of seems so spongy, you know, where you can't really get a sense of what's going on, because we're not getting a sense of what's going on. Do I have that right? And if I do, folks, that's why you got to talk to a pro.
And you are 100% right. And whoever you talk with, who's taking care of your accounting side, they should be erring on the side of caution and being conservative and collecting as many documents as possible and tracking this in detail. So yes, you are right, because we don't know. The ruling is going to come out after the 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I have
to
say, I
have to go back and scramble, and hopefully we won't. Hopefully we've used our best judgment, and we have people like the AICPA on our side who have, you know, said, look, we're going to bat for the small businesses, and we're going to try and make this. And so this is another thing, that if you got the PPP loan, the day you get it is the day of origin and the day you have to start using it. So this creates a whole line of confusion of, okay, I got the PPP loan on Thursday and payroll comes out Friday. So the way it's written currently is that you have to use that payroll, you have to use that loan money for that payroll that comes out Friday, which really makes no sense at all, because because
I submitted to my payroll company 3 days ago.
Exactly. And the intention of the CARES Act is to get people back to work. And how are you supposed to hire people back to work when you don't know that you're getting the PPP? And that's what it's supposed to be based on. So if you have a coffee shop right now that's completely closed and you get a PPP loan for the 10 people who work in the coffee shop, it's of no use to you. You could pay them, you could get them off unemployment, hopefully. But when your business does open, you still have zero money to open your business. So
And
it's an issue.
this is, and this goes to another point that that Atlantic article made, which is, and if you're a business where your major expense is something like, you know, a really expensive office lease because you're in the city, you know, you're in New York, or maybe you're in Jersey City, and because of the nature of your business, you had to take high profile space, you know, or you have some other operating expense, which is your primary expense that isn't payroll. The PPP does you know, very little good because it's built for companies that have payroll. It was built to try and keep people employed for 8 weeks.
And so I'm glad that the AICPA has made some suggestions. They've tried to, you know, tell them that it should start with the pay period. And maybe business owners should have the flexibility to start that 8-week pay period when the stay-at-home restrictions come off, or as they start to, because it's also based on head count and it's based on things that don't really make sense. And so the AICPA, and I'm like thinking they're the cavalry. They're coming in to save the day, and they're the voice of reason for small businesses. And so I think that we're going to see some changes, but as of now, the one thing I think we all agree on is document, document, document. And Aisha is going to tell us about coming back to work and what we need to do. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can let Aisha take over.
Great, thank you. Did I unmute myself? Yes, that's usually my issue. So thank you both. I'm always excited to continue doing these conversations because I think it's our little way of supporting the community and helping share some knowledge that helps make some sense of really the insanity going on around us. And because I'm a lawyer, I'm going to throw that disclaimer out there again that the information we're giving is generalized. It's not to address any specific detailed question. Feel free to reach out to us if you have detailed questions, and we can have a private attorney-client privileged conversation about your facts and circumstances. But we're trying to just give you some general guidance here. So today, Governor Murphy announced that we are continuing the shutdown order until June 5th. June 5th is not that far away. It's not the May 15th that everyone was hoping for, but clearly since our casualty rate has exceeded New York's at this point, May 15th wasn't realistic. I'm not sure that June 5th is realistic either, but for those of us who are either employees or employers, you have to start thinking about the what if that's realistic and what if I'm able to open. Always guiding your analysis is a thought of, am I an essential worker? Am I an essential workplace? And hence, do I fall outside of this stay home order? If you find yourself to be an essential worker and you had permitted some employees to work from home, and now, or you're part of an industry that's deemed essential workers, but you were allowed to continue working from home, there may come a point where your employer can say to you, I want, we need to really sort of end this work from home arrangement. We really need to be back in business. For instance, if you're an estate planning lawyer and you are at that point where you're starting to see more people having claims. Unfortunately, I spoke with an estate planning lawyer this morning who said they're actually seeing a lot of estate administration claims coming out of COVID-related passing. And so that's something that, industry by industry, you may see upticks in your business, you may see upticks in construction. Maybe Governor Murphy will allow the construction industry to go back to work outside of the exceptions that he had provided for. And so you need to be ready to go, as Jason said. You can't, you can't be deciding the day before he opens the state, what that opening is going to look like for you. And you should be thinking about that now, especially if you're an employee. As an employer, you need to have your plan in place. And most employers are working on that, and we'll talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. But even everything I talk about today is equally applicable to employees, because you're looking at it from the other side of the coin. You're thinking about, what does my return to work look like, and what am I willing and prepared to do? I had a conversation with another client this morning who said, their worker is refusing to even work from home. At that point, right? Right, Alyssa?
How does that make sense?
Yeah, nice work if you can get it.
Exactly. And essentially what this worker is angling to do is get kicked onto unemployment, because in some instances, you're making more money in unemployment than you were at work at your hourly rate. So there's some concern that, do I have to continue to employ this person? No, that is job abandonment. If you're being told that there is work and that you can do it in a safe environment, if you're being told that there is work and you're required to come into work, but you have your own private office and there's PPE equipment being provided to you, and there's Clorox wipes at every doorway, so you never have to touch anything. You cannot then say, I'm not going to go to work, or I won't come in, unless you have a doctor's note that gives you some legitimate reason to go in. And if you have a doctor's note that says you fall within one of those high-risk categories, the CDC on their website actually has identified high-risk medical conditions that should fall within the protections of all of these coronavirus rules. So if you have a doctor that says, no, this person is a diabetic, or they have some kind of chronic disease that makes them a high-risk category, then have that conversation with your employer to say, look, it's really not safe for me to be in a public space. My physician says so. And then have a plan on what the reasonable accommodation is that you're requesting, right? So under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the employer is required to have an interactive conversation with you. Nothing in any of these rules relieves an employer from having that interactive conversation. However, you as the employee actually have to initiate that conversation. So you should be saying, I don't want to do this that's part of your plan, and this is why, but here's what my solution is. Now, the employer gets to decide and have a conversation with you and decide what you're asking for is not reasonable. What you're asking for might cost the company too much money, and hence we cannot make that accommodation. However, we'd be willing to do X. So you need to have that back and forth, and there may come a point where the employer says, okay, you're not willing to budge, and we can't make what you want work, and so we have to let you go, right? My advice to you as an employee is make sure you actually engage in that conversation, because then you want to be able to say to unemployment, we tried everything and we couldn't make it work, right? In many instances, especially in this during this crisis, employers are not opposing unemployment. So they're recognizing that just because you aren't a good fit for their company, that doesn't mean that you should be financially impacted, especially in a very scary time. So, they're probably going to not contest your unemployment benefits.
I have a question. I actually have a question for you about unemployment benefits, because someone on the one of the attendees said, so they're a sole proprietor and they're collecting unemployment, and they have one employee and they just received the PPP funds. So now are they disqualified for unemployment because the PPP funds are for their one employee?
Okay, that's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
So if you were unemployment qualified and eligible, you don't have a corporate form, right? You're certifying that you were out there looking for work and that there's no work, right? And now you've received the PPP funds. My guess is you should have probably applied for PPP funds to account for your pay as well. So be really, really careful about who you're paying. And then be really, really careful about notifying unemployment if you're getting even $1 out of that PPP fund. Now you want to be careful, especially, and I had this conversation because with a client this morning, you have your PPP funds are to be used within a limited amount of time. And so, and I think that's one of the eligibility requirements, right? Is you have to use it within 8 weeks or 10 weeks of the date that it hits your account. So be careful about not sort of saying, well, that was meant for 2 people, but I'm going to stretch it out and not pay me and I'll claim unemployment. Be really, really careful about what the parameters are. Frankly, call Alyssa because you don't want to be guessing at this stuff. You don't want to be caught in a situation where unemployment claims that you were defrauding them. And you don't want to be caught in a situation where you've jeopardized your ability at loan forgiveness on the PPP end of it. And especially in light of the lack of guidance, call somebody else, right? Bounce this off of somebody who knows.
Right. Yeah, because it would be very expensive to hire an employment lawyer to get this straightened out.
Yeah.
So going back to, the other situation that came up today with a client was the employee doesn't want to work remotely. Now that's a tough sell, right? Especially when I brought it up, the look on Alyssa's face was, what in the hell? So I think it's very important that you engage in a conversation with your employer, or the employer asks the employee, why don't you want to work remotely? What's going on? Now, if they at all say that it's related to their child's childcare issues because of the executive order, you're going to have to accommodate that. That's life. Okay. You still have to ask a couple more questions about, okay, well, I understand that your child needs help with their schooling between the hours of 9 and 1. How about you work from 2 to 6? Try and have a discussion with your employer, with your employee about what makes sense so that everybody can continue doing the job they need to do. There may come a point. Go ahead.
Question about, so what if, the employee goes to the owner and says that they just don't feel like they mentally can work because they're so filled with anxiety. And I mean, you obviously have the conversation with them, but does that entitle them to like unemployment, or does that make them part of the sick leave? Like, how would you even proceed?
You're going to have the conversation. You're going to be super understanding about it. You're going to say, okay, so do you have a medical diagnosis on this? Right? So now we're in ADA, FMLA, FLA territory, right?
Okay.
And so you're going to say, has the doctor said that you can't work because of the overwhelming stress and anxiety that you're feeling? Are you taking medications that might prevent you from being able to do a good job for me? In which case, now you're stepping out of unemployment compensation, because unemployment compensation requires the threshold assertion of I am ready, willing, and able to work.
Oh, okay.
You are now in the realm of I am not ready, willing, and able to work, but I have temporary disability benefits available. Okay. And so you would apply for state temporary disability benefits. That automatically kicks this whole conversation into the context of you need medical certifications, you need a doctor to assert. Listen, we're all stressed out.
Yeah.
We're all upset. There's days that, you convince yourself, I got to get up, I got to put my hair and face together, and I got to get on the screen with somebody. So recognizing that sort of your run-of-the-mill, ordinary stress and anxiety related to the fact that we are experiencing a global pandemic unlike anything I ever thought I would live through is actually not enough. You're going to need some medical diagnosis to go with it.
Okay. Thank you.
And you know what? It is entirely likely that if you reach out to your physician, that your physician is going to work with you.
Yeah,
Right?
I would hope so.
Even giving you a right out of work for 2 weeks,
Mhm.
right? They're going to work with you. But at this point, if you've used up your PTO time and you've used up your New Jersey sick leave and you've used up your federal sick leave and you've used up your vacation days, you are now on the state disability plan if you don't have any private disability policy. All right, I always love it when you have questions because that's so much easier than just presenting.
That was fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting.
No, I love it. Okay, so always, 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 as an employee and an employer, explain yourself, right? Explain why you are asking for a particular change in the employment policy. So let's talk about employment policies. As an employer, if you have, I would say if you have even one employee, you should have an employment handbook. One of the things you're going to have to look at now in your employment handbook, and as an employee, pay attention to, you have vacation policies. An employer may turn around now and be well within their rights to say, you all have 4 weeks of vacation left. I cannot afford to have you all out for 4 weeks at some time between June 5th and December 31st when you're, which is a period of your leave, that you could use the leave this year. And so an employer may say, I can pay out some of that leave, right? I'm going to write you a check I'm going to buy out some of the leave. And I'm going to say that you can only use leave at certain times and on certain schedules, and we're going to have to stagger it. And you may all be unhappy because you won't get the leave that you preferred. And that's life. Be prepared for that conversation because it's a reasonable one. Okay. As an employee, what you want to look for is that a certain number of days that were told to you at the start of employment as being your PTO time are what you're entitled to in this year, right? So ask your employer if they say to you, well, you have 4 weeks, but I'm only going to let you use 2. Ask the question of what are you going to do with the other 2, right? You're going to write me a check for it. Does it carry forward to next year? One of the things to remember is that New Jersey earned sick leave. The sick leave law requires every employer to give every employee, regardless of size, 40 hours of paid sick leave a year. The employer is the one paying the sick leave. It's not coming from the state or the federal government. The employer is required to carry forward anything that's unused, but they're not required to give you more than 40 hours of paid sick leave in a year, right? This is the New Jersey format. The other thing the employer is not required to do is pay it out to you if you leave or if you're terminated. So be aware of what your rights are, right? Be aware of, if I have 40 hours of sick leave this year that I have not used, I can't make the employer pay it to me, but I'm not going to be, but I will be able to carry it forward till next year. And that's something to be sort of aware of. One of the places that you might want to look as an employee is go to the EEOC website. It's just eeoc.gov. They're updating every day. They put stuff up, they take it down. They're trying to figure this out as these new rules unroll. So it's not easy. I sympathize with them. They're struggling too. But if you have sort of preliminary questions about something that an employer is telling you, or that you need to figure out, can I do this? It's a good place to start, or call an employment lawyer. Let's see, what else? You you should be aware that an employer would be well within their rights to take your temperature before coming into the workplace, right? That's reasonable.
Is it? So they were just saying this for something. Oh, movie theaters in Texas. They are taking everybody who works there's temperature, and as you come in, they take your temperature.
Yeah. So OSHA has said that taking temperatures is a reasonable method of trying to ascertain that your workplace is safe and healthy, right? So you could take, actually there's lots of companies out there now that are selling these, they're like temperature monitors.
But they're like big, put them over the door.
I mean, they're basically like, it's like an iPad on a stand.
Okay.
And somehow I don't know if you touch it or it scans you and, says, okay, this person does not have a fever. So that's something you might have to just be prepared to experience as part of your normal work day, okay, as a part of coming into work. You may also be absolutely, even once they return us to work, Governor Murphy has said we're still going to be trying to enforce social distancing rules. So as an employer and an employee, you should be prepared for various shifts of work, whereas that might not have been an issue before. So think about that, right? These are the terms and conditions of your employment, but they're being changed not because the employer wants to change things up. Most likely they don't want to, but you have a global pandemic that you're dealing with. So, think about, again, if you can't work a particular shift, explain to the employer why. It's really important to be having those dialogues and conversations. Employers could require gloves and PPE equipment. I haven't seen any guidance that says employers are required to provide it at their cost. They may say, look, make a mask, right? Yeah. We can find masks, they're most likely employers will always provide things like Clorox wipes and, ways to clean the workplace.
Right, if they can find them. I know the IRS was actually telling people that they had to get their own masks because they couldn't get them.
Right.
And the same thing with the Navy. They were telling people coming aboard naval ships and the crew, you have to get your own masks because we can't even get access to them.
Right. And it's a crazy situation. I mean, yeah. I don't have a mask. I'm trying not to go anywhere. but really, I mean, I ordered masks off of Amazon. It had to have been like 7 weeks ago. I don't still have them. Right.
Good New York Times instructions on making a mask from an old t-shirt.
Yeah. That's
good.
Without sewing. Doesn't even require sewing.
Well, there's been some very creative masks
yes.
making, by the way.
Yeah. There is guidance, but I think it's also important. There isn't a requirement or an obligation of an employer to provide it where it's not reasonably available.
Okay.
The other question,
any more than I have to pay for your uniform, I guess, necessarily, right? I could say you must have a uniform, but I'm not going to pay for it. You've got to pay for it, right? Same rules.
Exactly. So the other thing that just I think you want to be really careful about, and again, this is something you check back in with your financial advisor, right? Your CPA, your regular accountants, your bookkeepers, is if you're going to take that step of claiming either the healthcare exemption or the small business exemption to the Families First Corona Response Act, which is saying to somebody, now I've had clients call me who work for healthcare providers who said that the employer is claiming that exemption to avoid paying the 80 hours of paid sick leave when they contracted COVID in the workplace. And there is not guidance, but the way it's written, they would be allowed to claim that exemption. There is also an exemption for small businesses. And I will tell you, be really careful before you claim that exemption, especially if you got PPP funds, right? Especially if you got EIDL funds and you're saying, listen, this person is claiming that they have to stay home for 10 weeks and I have to pay them 2/3 pay because they have to take care of their children. And, I have no ability to, I don't want to do that. That seems ridiculous to me. Be really careful before you go there, because you're going to have to justify that keeping them on payroll would cause you to be in the red. You're going to have to show that it would have a substantial impact on your business, and that you would essentially have to incur debt or be in the red for that specific reason. So if you are going to try and claim the small business exemption, work closely with your accountant. Make sure you document your financials every step of the way. And then make sure that the employee understands that as well, that this is why they're being let go. 9 times out of 10, the protections, on unemployment are good enough that you're not going to end up having an issue, but don't assume that. Plan for the future, and just make sure you're documenting. That's all I had. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aisha. That was really great. And I'm sorry, Jason and I were yakking at the beginning, so we ran over a bit, and I'm glad you were able to get everything in, because I think it's so important to know what to expect as the employer or the employee, and where we are right now. So thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it. We're going to have this as a recording, and we're going to make it available to everybody. And we will post some information. We'll be back in 2 weeks. That was nice seeing everybody. Take care. Stay healthy.
Take care, everybody.